I'm Molly Butler. I'm the Service Program Director of the Notre Dame Alumni Association, and I'm going to be your moderator this afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us on our inaugural Hesburgh Service Initiative webinar. We'll be focusing on homelessness today with our guest, Steve Camilleri. Steve is a 1994 graduate of the University of Notre Dame. As a participant in the first class of the Notre Dame ACE program, he taught grade school in Hammond, Louisiana. He then went on to receive a Master of Nonprofit Administration from Notre Dame in 2001 and became the founding director of the Notre Dame Vocation Initiative. In 2004, he became the executive director of the South Bend Center for the Homeless and has been there ever since. So we are thrilled to have him with us here today. We're going to be welcoming your questions throughout this webinar. There is a button on the upper left of your screen where it says questions and answers. So you're welcome to type in your question and we'll answer as many as we can, in addition to the questions that we received in advance. So to start, we're going to begin with a quick video clip.
My name is Steve, and this is my aha moment. One of the students said, "Hey, Mr. Cam, do you know that person you just gave your lunch to?" And I said, "No, I don't, but it looked like someone who was in need of food." The next thing I know, this student had gathered 100 students, grabbed all their lunches, and fed the 50 people that were out there on the Delta. And it turned out that they were all homeless. Making a difference comes in all ages, and I learned a lot from those 11 and 12-year-olds.
Mutual of Omaha. Insure your possibilities. Insurance, retirement, bank.
So, Steve, I'm told that they edited your clip down to 30 seconds. Was there more to the story?
Sure. First of all, I want to say hello and welcome all our friends who are watching over their lunch hour. So thanks so much for taking the issue of homelessness serious enough that you would be with us today on this webinar. I'm told that we had several hundred registered for it, so we're really excited about that. I've never been on this end of a webinar. I've been there where you were watching, so I hope that we answer the questions that you have, and that this is also, if we can allow it to be on a Friday in Lent, a prayerful experience. And I'd like us to just call to mind those in our lives, in our communities that do experience homelessness, that will keep them in our thoughts and prayers, and to be mindful of what does homeless mean and what is our definition of home. People find home in many different places, and so our definition and thought on what home is may be different than what someone else that you would meet on the streets or in homeless facilities is. So, but that little aha moment that ran on Mutual of Omaha, first of all, my friends who saw it wondered if I was out there selling insurance for Mutual of Omaha. I actually wasn't. They came into South Bend to do these aha moment stories, and because of our work at the Center for the Homeless, they asked me to share a story. And it just sort of turned out that my story and experience was in the great city of New Orleans. So I don't know if we have any viewers from New Orleans, but I welcome you down there. And just the longer version of that story was that there were many people who were experiencing homelessness when I was with 5th and 6th graders on a field trip. And we noticed them right there off the Mississippi, right by the aquarium on the Delta. And all I did was I kind of snuck over there. I don't know why, but I didn't want to be seen by any of my students. And I snuck over and I brought my brown bag, peanut butter and jelly, carrot, and a little carton of milk to one of the folks who it was clear to me it was experienced homelessness. A few of them had signs and whatnot asking for help. And what I didn't know was that a few of the students were watching. And it turns out it was good that they were watching because they had a much better idea than I did. They thought, what if we collected all of our sandwiches? And this is about 100 students in the 5th and 6th grade, and collected them all back in those big cardboard boxes that we had brought. And what if we fed all the people that were out there? And that's exactly what they did. And no sooner did that happen that a few folks who had guitars were singing with our students. One gentleman had a Bible, broke out the Bible and prayed with our students, and it was my most teachable moment in those 2 years of the ACE program, and it really told me a lot about sharing our experiences, and when we're reaching out to others to give them help, to invite other people to be part of that experience. As I see some of your great questions, and I hope you ask questions while we are going to be with you over the lunch hour, we probably all have the same questions, and some of the questions that you've asked are the questions I have as well in terms of how to help people who experience homelessness. So I'm excited about spending the next few moments with you.
So we've had a handful of questions that have been submitted in advance, and a lot of them touch on, what do you do when you see someone who is homeless? Do you give them $1? Do you buy them a meal? How do you respond to them in a way that you feel called with your faith to respond to them as human beings while not wanting to give money because you're afraid of what they're going to use it on, etc.?
Yeah, well, that's it. Certainly a great question. I know it's a question that many people have asked in advance of this webinar, and many people actually ask me that question. It's probably one of the most frequent questions I get asked, other than what can I do to help the Center for the Homeless specific here in town. My answer to that question has evolved over time, and it continues to evolve through different experiences. And so just a couple of thoughts I have on it. First of all, this is called the Hesburgh series. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't call all of our attention to Father Hesburgh and the great services that were just shared here on campus. And I'd invite everyone to visit the Alumni Association's website and watch those videos. I want to make a quick reference to what the great senator from Wyoming, Alan Simpson, said in the beginning of his remarks with Father Ted. He said that they shared a common credo, and that was, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, then do. And so the short answer is, when you see someone who's maybe on a street corner and they have a sign, or maybe they've approached you specifically and asked you for $1 or $5 or a sandwich or whatever it is they might be asking you for, it's to do something. Now that something is really going to be customized based on your experience. I've had such a varied experiences with folks who have signs and are in need, and in different cities around the country, and here locally in South Bend. So every situation is going to be a little bit different. So there's really no blanket answer that I can give, that nope, don't give anything, or yes, give all the time. But when I say just do, what do I mean? I think first and foremost, keep that person in your thoughts and prayers. Because if they're obviously on a street corner, in need, having signs, something has brought them to that moment that they're in great need. Now, the need might be that they have an experience with mental illness, or they have a substance abuse problem, or they are experiencing homelessness, or some other ill, or something that they have need for. But just imagine yourself in that person's shoes, that whatever it is that has brought you on that street corner in that cold day here in these winters of South Bend, or maybe it's an extremely hot day in some of the hotter cities around the country, but whatever it is, they're in great need. And so I just ask that you can keep them in your prayers and in your thoughts. So that's something we can all do. And the other thing you can do is to maybe interact with them. First and foremost, you want to feel safe, of course. And if you're with children, you want to encourage children to always cautiously approach our strangers. But if you're with them, I talk to my children about the folks that we see on street corners holding up signs. So there's no sense hiding this from our children. This is something they see and they'll continue to see. So share that and share that story. And then I would encourage you to, if you feel comfortable, to meet the person as you would want to meet anyone. One of my favorite poems is called Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And there's a line in there where he says, I am a part of all I've met. And I strongly believe that, and of course us as a community of believers, that we're all connected to each other. And so we're connected to that man or woman or child or family that we see experience homelessness or holding up those signs. And so what do we want to do as humans? We want to feel connected. We want to be called by name. So I would encourage you, first and foremost, treat this person with the dignity and respect that we all deserve, and know them, and ask them their name, and if you feel comfortable, even ask them, how did you end up here? What is it that brought you out here in need? And I think my experiences are they're typically brutally honest. Sometimes they might even tell you, well, I just need money because I am going to drink, or I just need money because I do need a sandwich. Or a gentleman I spoke to yesterday told me that I make enough on the street corner that I can get a hotel room until there's a bed at the Center for the Homeless, because we're full right now. So you get a varying amount of needs. Then I guess the next level is, so you've established these needs. Maybe you want to have gift cards. I know folks have gift cards in their hand. I'm not going to say a particular restaurant, but think of those restaurants that are in many cities and easy to get to within walking distance. Maybe you have gift cards. Now, I know some people might say, well, if I have a gift card for $5 or $10, that might be $5 or $10 less than, and it makes it easier than if they have other money that they need for alcohol or whatnot. At the moment with which you give, it's not ours to question what they do with it. And I did actually talk to Father Hesburgh about this. I had many opportunities to talk with him about what to do in these situations. And I would say quickly his thought was to give. It would be to give and to not question when we give. But again, this is something that you would have to decide what you're comfortable doing. If you give them money, once you give it to them, I don't think you should question. Of course, an answer from a guy in a nonprofit is to find those nonprofits in your community that help people who experience homeless and maybe support them, and go down and work at soup kitchens and serve meals. But there is no one answer, I think, that covers it all. I think it's evolving, but I think it's really important to engage in a relationship with someone who's having that experience, treat them with dignity and respect, make a decision as to what extent you want to help this person, and then once you help them, don't ask what they did with it, and then always continue to keep them in prayers and thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I think you touched on all of that. There are a handful of people who had said, what is an appropriate amount to give?
Yeah.
And then you also answered, can I ask what the people are going to do with the money afterwards?
Yeah. Okay, so an appropriate amount to give is a great question, and what are they doing afterwards? I think you can ask them probably before you would give them whatever it is you'd give them. You know, hey, what are you going to be really doing with this? I oftentimes, when I'm with the folks, I ask to go with them. Now, that would mean that you have a certain amount of time to go down and have a meal, but if you imagine you get the opportunity to do that, hey, well, why don't we go break bread together? And I've had some great experiences with doing that. Again, you need to feel safe and comfortable, and that would be a personal decision. As far as the amount, I would just share a story of a gentleman who's a friend of mine, and you could look this up, Willie Baronet, B-A-R-O-N-E-T. Willie Baronet is actually he's an artist and a graphic designer down south at SMU, and he has a blog called We Are All Homeless. And what Willie does is he actually approaches the person, and he traveled last year through 23 cities across America, and he bought the person's sign. And he typically offers $5 or $10 for the sign. And I actually bought a sign recently, and I just thought I would share it. I have a couple of different signs. This sign that I bought said, homeless, need help, Google it. And then he has a quote from a Bob Dylan song. But this is this one particular person's sign that was bought for $5. And Willie tells me that he buys signs for $5 or $10. And I've done it now several times after meeting Willie. And then actually I mail the signs out to Willie. And so if you look him up, Willie Baronet, and you buy any of these signs, which is sort of, he turns them into an art project. And he displayed it most recently this winter at NYU in Manhattan. I just thought that was a really neat idea, and there's some value. This is the exchange. Here's some, because I know a lot of people do not want to just give a handout. So at least in turn you feel like, well, it wasn't just a handout. I got something in exchange, and now I'm going to contribute it to Willie's artwork, which is telling a great story, again, on this site, We Are All Homeless. It's a great story. And so that is one approach. We took our guests who live at the Center for the Homeless, and we asked them if they were to write their own sign, what would it look like? And we did that this past Christmas through the community. And I did bring a couple of those signs, and I just wanted to share with you some of the folks who I become friends with who experience homelessness in our community, and what they thought. I feel like one of those songs where the guy stands there and holds up all the different signs. But you know, one of them said, "Rethink homelessness." Another one said, "I will make my own rainbow." Someone said, I need a job, not your money. So, you know, we work with people who are interested in having careers, not even just a job, but something that's going to stand them for their whole lives. This person said, "I will keep striving forward. I will keep striving forward." This one will be hard to read. I think it says, I was selling automobiles, new and used. So this is someone who was at our facility and had been a car salesperson. And this person said, "I fix homes for a living, and I do work with pride and honesty to my clients." Okay. And this person said, "Thankful I have a job and a place for kids and kids and a place to stay." It's an interesting thought, right? They stay at the Center for the Homeless, and they feel good that they have a place to stay, and they also have a job. So we have many folks who live at the Center for the Homeless who work, but as you can imagine, with the wage, sometimes that just doesn't cut it, and it particularly doesn't when you come in with 2 or 3 children or more. And then this sign says, "I was a wife till my husband suddenly died and left me penniless and homeless." And Molly, if you let me, I'd like to talk a little bit about that sign and the ways in which people become homeless. Certainly there are some people who are born into a situation where they've experienced homelessness. We've had guests, again, my story at the Center for the Homeless is meeting folks who actually grew up as children with homeless parents, and then they themselves ended up homeless. And those are always sad stories and experiences. I mentioned earlier people might have a substance abuse problem, mental illness we've already mentioned. In this instance, someone who had the loss of a loved one, and in that story, since I know the person personally, the husband was the breadwinner, and this person had a hard time getting into the workforce. We've had people experience homelessness because of health issues, and loss of health could lead to the loss of a job, and then you don't have the health insurance, and then you have to make some decisions as to what you want to pay for. Am I going to pay for my insurance? Am I going to pay for the heat in the house? Am I going to pay for groceries? Am I going to pay for rent? And they might end up getting evicted, and they end up at a facility like ours. Most people that I've met will tell you their experiences of homelessness are coming out of a place of profound disconnectedness. And I think we all experience disconnectedness and brokenness in different ways. But the folks that I've met, again, whether it's at the Center for the Homeless or through the country, have really disconnected in a profound way. And so what I think we try to do at the center, and what we're encouraging everyone to do, is to reconnect people. And the way you do that is through building relationships. And how you decide to build relationships, that will be your own way to do that. Whether it's getting to know these folks, some of the folks have signs that say, "We'll work for food." Well, put them to work. If that's, if there are some odd jobs that would, or if you maybe own a company and you want to give an opportunity or chance. We experience a lot of veterans. We have a veterans facility, and many of our veterans have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, and they need help, just like many folks. We believe that the experience of homelessness in and of itself is a traumatic experience. So if you've experienced trauma, what we try to provide is trauma-informed care, and acknowledging that this person has had a traumatic experience, and they need to feel safe, first of all, when you've had a traumatic experience. They need their own space, and so we try to give them space. And we also try to give them space to adjust to being in a facility, which for many folks at the Center of Homelessness, it might be their first time having that experience.
Do you find that there are people who resist coming to the center? They prefer to be on the center. Is there a way to help them in another manner?
Yeah, so doesn't that seem like an odd question? Are there people who actually choose to be homeless? And the answer is actually yes. There's also a panhandling culture. So I've approached so many folks who have those signs, and they choose that lifestyle, and they choose to be panhandlers. I've met folks who we've asked to come into our facility, and they choose not to. And usually with us, it's because we hold them accountable, and we're going to ask them to take on chores, to go through classes, to go through programming. And sometimes they're not ready for it. We hope that eventually they'll come to it, and they'll have that intrinsic motivation to do that. And then we've had folks that we've been able to provide housing for. And I mentioned that trauma-informed care. I think of one particular story of a friend, Mel, who had that experience, and I won't share last names, but we had an opportunity to get this great guy into housing, but the place that we put him in, if you could imagine, it was actually too big. 700 square feet was too big for Mel. Mel hadn't been housed for 25 years, and he didn't know what to do to himself. All he wanted was a chaise lounge chair and a radio transmitter. He had spent a lot of time in the woods, and this was an experience for him that was so foreign to him. He wasn't comfortable, and I won't even say sadly Mel's back on the street, because Mel chooses that. And Mel comes into our facility for weather amnesty, which is just an overnight stay. So I've seen him much of the past 5 months, but that's been an experience of someone firsthand, I could say, who chooses his lifestyle over coming into our facility and then getting placed in housing. And that's what I opened up with. Our definition of home might be different from someone else's, and you can find home in many different places. So it doesn't just have to be in the physical space that's around you. And for Mel, he feels very comfortable out in nature, and that's his choice.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important thing to touch on, because I think it's easy to judge somebody who may be out on the street and you see them day after day and asking for money. But some of the thoughts and ideas that you all have shared with us is that it helps you to say, I can still help this person by honoring them as a human being and getting to know their name and passing them on the street each day and saying, hello, how are you? And reserving judgment, whether or not you're able to give money or whether or not you may agree with their decisions on how they may have ended up on the street. We had a couple questions come in here by people, one from Indianapolis, one from Chicago, one from New York, all touching on the same thing.
Yeah.
Where if you encounter 5 or 10 homeless people every day, you see them, there's more than you would ever be able to help. What can you do to make a difference for them if you can't give money, or you don't even have enough, you don't have enough time to have a conversation with each one, or you'd be doing it all day. What can you do?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I don't find myself to be an expert to answer that. And I think it's a question that I struggle with. Those cities that Molly mentioned, I'm from New York, and I'm often in Indianapolis or Chicago, so I can relate to those cities. I've seen homelessness firsthand in each of those cities, and I've had that same feeling where it almost seems overwhelming that block after block you see someone who maybe has a sign, is holding out a can, maybe they're in a wheelchair, they're sleeping on a bench, and it can be overwhelming. And I guess I think a couple things, and maybe I was drawn to Mother Teresa, and I thought of just kind of helping one at a time. I think of the idea of doing what you can with what you have where you are. And so if you have a minute to talk to one person, maybe that's one person whose day you brightened. I think we also have to really look hard at ourselves and ask ourselves, why are we doing this? What are our motives? What are our reasons for helping others? sometimes we have to sometimes maybe it makes us feel good. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's nice to feel good and to have that feeling, but sometimes we have to ask, well, what does that person want? Maybe they're not as interested that we felt good about it, but they want to feel good. So what is it that's going to make them feel good? And that goes back to what we said earlier. You know, what are those experiences of having a meal with them, giving them money for this, praying for them? And so, you know, if you see 5, 10, 25 people in a city, these numbers are daunting. I mean, the amount of people who experience homelessness on any given night is over 600,000 a night. We see millions of homeless people throughout the course of the year, unrepeated folks. The average age of a homeless person is 7 years old. We see more and more veterans who experience homelessness. So, you know, I can give you all these statistics, and each of them are just as overwhelming as seeing that one person on the street, because no one should experience homelessness. But again, if we can do what we can do in the time and space that we're at. There are so many unsung heroes out there who take on different programs. I think of so many children who raise money for us through the old lemonade stands, and when they have a birthday party, they don't accept gifts, they make donations to us. I see folks who knit hats and scarves. I had someone come up to me today and told me about a program called Busy Hands here in Michiana, and that their busy hands are sewing and they want to help us. I've mentioned we've had businesses who hire our guests. So again, I mean, it's what you choose to do with your time, but what I would encourage people to do is to be faithful to their passion. If they're really passionate about helping people who experience homelessness, then you're all probably already involved in helping your local facilities. And so feel good about that. And then when you get the opportunity to talk with one or two of those people, try to do that. But I just hope that we're not beating ourselves up because we can't get to everybody, as much as I know we all want to.
So every little bit helps.
I think that's been the experience I've had, that every little bit helps. I mean, we have to do all that we can. I did also want to mention, I just want to mention the Pope, because I'm just so excited about the Pope, and I'm so excited about what I've read and the things he's doing, certainly in Vatican City. We've maybe heard some stories where he's adding showers in the local bathrooms out there. He's invited people who experience homelessness into his home for his birthday to celebrate with him. It's clear that the Pope is living out the gospel, but we can learn so much from his interactions with people who experience homelessness. And I'm just so excited. He's washed the feet of homeless people. So he is a great model for us, for the church, and for the world to look at. So I'm just really excited about that. And I thought I'd have to mention what Pope Francis has been doing.
Great model. This is an interesting question. So there's a woman, and she says she doesn't want to give money, but she wants to take care of the health. How do you offer help in terms of health?
Health. Okay, she wants it. Okay. Well, you know, I don't know what city this woman is writing in from, but a lot of the major cities have great. Boston is one that pops right to mind. There's such a great relationship between providing health care to the homeless through that system that they have in place. We have a great system here in South Bend. In fact, we have a clinic right on site at the Center for the Homeless, but if they choose to go to other clinics, there are 3 or 4 others in the community. So if this person wants to help someone who has health issues, maybe I'm presuming that they've already gotten to know the person so that they know that they have health issues. So you've built a relationship with them already. See if there's a clinic in the community. Oftentimes there are clinics that are on sliding scales. The clinic we work with is sliding scale, and if you have no insurance, then you don't have to pay. And see if they can connect them directly to a clinic. What we also find in this community, and I'm sure it's similar to others, so many great doctors and practitioners who want to help. We have just a wonderful dentist in town who each year provides over $100,000 in dentures to our folks who experience homelessness, and that idea of having the ability to smile. You know, so many folks I meet who experience homelessness, they might have bad dental hygiene and they don't even want to smile. So imagine that. and we have such great dentists in the community. We have the local colleges who have dental programs, and those students provide dental hygiene. And dental hygiene affects other aspects, beyond just your mouth. I mean, there are heart issues and everything. So that's really a great first place to start. But find those other clinics in the community, and our website is cfh.net. And so if there's anybody who has questions that don't get answered, because it looks like we have a lot of questions come in, please email me. If you go to cfh.net, my email is going to probably populate somewhere on there. It's scamilleri@cfh.net, and we might know some different people in different cities that we can point you towards through some of our partner agencies and some people we've tried to help replicate our model here.
That's great. This just came in from Pam, and it kind of addresses another way to help those who are homeless without money. She says that she creates kits that include socks, paste, and toothbrush, and soap, protein bars, maybe some fresh fruit, duct tape, Band-Aids, deodorant, and weather-appropriate items. I love that.
I love that. We have so many great programs like that. We call those bags of love. And when people ask what they can do or what their kids can do, Pam, that's great. That's what we're asking people to do, because we need to provide a lot of that, not only to the 200 people who live at our facility, but we see a dozen every day who don't live at our facility who need those products. And maybe that's a great idea to keep in your car, a little bag of love. And when you're at one of those street corners, you could just hand those to someone who's experienced homelessness. They would really appreciate that.
That's great. Thank you so much for your questions that are coming in. This is fantastic.
While Molly's looking through the questions, we had one came in about we see folks who are very well educated experience homelessness, and someone, Barb, wrote in about her friend who has a master's degree and had done really well, but she just sort of fell out and is now living in a car, is couch surfing, and she earns money as a street performer and a photographer. And she's been told in different cities that she can't stay in her car overnight. And this has been going on now for 4 years. And so she's asking, how can someone who's well educated and knows how to fill out job and benefit applications, etc., and who wants to work and succeed and have that normal life, how can they still receive help with food and lodging? And what's out there for people like her? And I should say this woman has some health and allergy issues, so she's not able to live in many of the low-rent apartments. So unquestionably, this is complex. In a lot of cities around the country, they have an initiative called the 100,000 Homes Campaign. And the 100,000 Homes Campaign is already met its goal of 100,000 and counting, of taking 100,000 chronically homeless persons and housing them. And they're usually housing them through a Housing First model. And this, to me, sounds like something that Barb's friend would really benefit from. And there are dollars that the government gives out for permanent supportive housing, and they're for the chronically homeless. And from this short brief that Barb gives me, my sense is that this woman would qualify through HUD's definition of someone who would be chronically homeless, because she mentioned this has been going on for 4 years, and she's had that high incidence of couch surfing and living in the car. So if it's possible, Barb, to connect her to a facility that would, so for us, for instance, we just received funds to house 6 chronically homeless persons through a permanent supportive housing grant. That means folks who really aren't able to take full advantage of our programming, live in community, and might have issues like her with this health and the allergy and asthmas, but someone who might not come into our facility can be housed because they're chronically homeless. And this has taken well over 100,000 people off the streets in cities, and South Bend, Indiana has signed up as part of the 100,000 Homes Campaign. And so again, we're pleased that we have 6 vouchers to do it. I'd like to see many more, because we have more than 6 chronically homeless persons in our community.
Wow, that's great. I think that goes to show too that people from all backgrounds can. This is another question that came in. Generally speaking, have you seen a shift in the major causes of homelessness since the recession?
Yeah. Oh, it's a great question. So the question that came in was sort of, I mean, it's had the causes of homelessness changed. And I think back to the McKinney-Vento Act of 1987, and why that was written into law, and how we've changed and evolved in nearly 30 years since that act. If we do go back 4 years ago, we can say a lot of incidents of homelessness were caused by the Great Recession. That's, I think that's pretty obvious to a lot of people. We saw the need for our resources increase and the support of our resources decrease, and that was simply a matter of a lot of people, a lot of foundations. It was a hard time for a lot of folks, and so they found different ways to give other than financial resources, but our need really increased. Now I'd say, I mentioned earlier veterans, we opened up a facility 3 years ago to house veterans, and we have 24 men that live in that facility, and for certain reasons and studies, it wasn't a co-ed facility. We hope to open up a home for female veterans at some time, hopefully not in the too distant future. But so one answer is we've seen a rise in the amount of veterans who experience homelessness. And I think we've had more services, not just in our community, but as a nation, that have helped serve homeless individuals. And there's been a lot of financial support by the government to help do that. So even our facility, we receive a grant per diem from the government to do it. Also, mental illness. We've seen facilities in our community and throughout our state close their doors that provided the help that folks who struggle with mental illness. So and there's a lot of dual diagnosis, people who experience both mental illness and perhaps a substance abuse. And so those numbers have increased, particularly again with folks who have mental illness. And oftentimes the facility who provides the treatment, they've shortened the amount of stay someone can stay. So maybe if it was an average of 9 to 10 days, now it's 3 days. And when folks get released, they often show up at our facility. And I'd say the same about folks who've been incarcerated. Oftentimes, after someone who has had an experience in jail or prison, we get several letters every week from folks who would need to stay at our facility because they don't have as many opportunities. And there are a lot of great programs to help folks who are incarcerated and what would be called re-entry programs. But so I'd say, we continue to see folks who experience incarceration. We continue to see a rise in mental illness and veterans. And then remember, I said the average age of a homeless person is about 7 years old. So the amount of families who experience homelessness is very high. And there are so many, we know the invisible poor, the working poor. About 3 years ago, there was a great feature on that that Lester Holt did, and it was in communities like Denver, Colorado, where people lived in the suburbs and were the working poor and were having to take on 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. So it's all around us. Homelessness doesn't discriminate, and people who struggle are everywhere because it's just really difficult.
What extent do you think of those in South Bend who are homeless are working poor? That they're working part-time or full-time, but aren't making enough money to provide food or housing?
Yeah, I earlier mentioned, I think it was in one of the signs, someone who said they're happy to have a job, but also a place to stay and their child. I don't have a hard, fast statistic right now, but I feel pretty comfortable that about 1/3 of the people who live at our facility do have work. They do have an income. We're encouraging them to save that income so that they can have some funds to, whether it's a home or an apartment, pay first month's rent, deposit, and whatever they need. We'd help them with furniture and things of that sort. But we're seeing a lot of folks here who do work. Now, we're seeing some moves made by the larger companies. I think Walmart talked about increasing the minimum wage, and I think others will follow when someone like Walmart does that. So it's important that those wages get increased to a just and living wage. And what we're out there doing here locally is we're trying to encourage businesses, because what we're telling them is that we're working with these folks who experience homelessness. We're putting them through programming. We're putting them through job training, interview skills, resumes, cover letters, how to get a job, how to keep a job. So it's not really a risk to hire folks who lived at the center. We think they're actually a real good bet, and we want you to take a chance on them. So, people were early asked what can they do if they know these folks who experience homelessness, to encourage businesses to hire them. And we're seeing great programs around the country, social entrepreneurship ventures, whether it's a great Delancey Street in San Francisco. We've got the Greyston Bakery in New York. We have Haley's House, a bakery in Boston. We had a landscape business at the Center for the Homeless. Now we opened up a store with St. Vincent de Paul. So there are great opportunities to put together social ventures to help people who experience homelessness. And then you most certainly won't feel like it's a handout then, because you've put people to work, you've given them opportunities, and are helping them become self-sufficient and receive a fair and living wage.
That's great. That touches on another question that just came in. Can you give us some guidance in terms of how can we influence policy, legislation, or funding on the state or even federal level to support the homeless community?
Yeah, it's so that's a great question. What can we do to influence policy at local or state levels? What can we do to advocate for homeless persons? I think earlier I mentioned with Barb's friend, some places she's been in, they won't let you stay in a car overnight. I read an article not too long ago about an older gentleman who was arrested in Florida for feeding a homeless person. We need to fight against some of these laws that were put in place, and we need to try to overturn them. There's some laws out there. We're seeing some changes that might happen to the SNAP program, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Some people might know it as food stamps or the EBT. So what do? I mean, obviously you can write your local legislators and your state legislators. You can also team up. I would love if folks teamed up with us at the center and said these were issues they're really passionate about, and can we do things together to meet with local mayors, councilmen, county commissioners, and then to meet at the state level. So I think those are some sort of like grassroots things that we can do. If you know folks who have relationships with these, look, at the end of the day, we do not like to take municipal dollars. And in fact, we do not receive any city dollars, we do not receive any county dollars, and we do not receive any state dollars. The only dollars we end up receiving are federal dollars that pass through, and they are typically for our programs like we mentioned, permanent supportive housing, our transitional housing. There was one for our landscape business, and there was one for our licensed therapists. But we much prefer not to receive those dollars and not to have the strings that are attached to them. We do much better to work with our donors and to work with foundations, and it's just more compelling to us. And we try to keep the amount of governmental funding less than 15% for organizations. So that's funding issues. But back to the laws and policies that are being made, I think we really need to stand up and make some noise about it. And the problem is these things will hit the media for a day, and it's one quick story, and then it goes away. But I think we really have to take an active role in meeting with our Congress, senators, whomever it is, and sharing them. And again, we talked earlier about kind of being faithful to your passion. If that's one of the things that this person who questions is passionate about, then maybe find people who share that passion and start knocking on some doors, or maybe you yourself run for one of the offices, city council or others, to change some of the local or state laws.
That's excellent. Another question that came in, you mentioned talking to your own children about people who are homeless. Do you have suggestions for teachers or parents in terms of what to say to your child when you see a homeless person on the street that are age appropriate but also addressed? Yeah,
well, I get, we're a community of faith here, so again, I'll make a great reference to Father Hesburgh, and the gospel at his funeral was Matthew 25. Visit the sick, feed the hungry, clothe the naked. That's where I would start, and that's where we have started in our family. So I have a 9 and a 10-year-old, and first of all, they visited where I work. So they've been to the Center of Homelessness often. I introduced them to the people who live there as my friends. So I say, this is Daddy's friend Jim or John or Joe or Mary or, whatever, whomever it is. But then, let's break apart that gospel and say, what does this really mean? And, we are models for our children. We're models as teachers, as parents, as neighbors. Today's gospel was love thy neighbor. Our neighbor is the homeless person on that street corner at the red light when you're too busy. They are our neighbor. So if you get the opportunity to tell that person's story and say, it looks like that person's going through a really hard time, and according to their sign that they would work for food, or they need food, or they need money, or they're a single mom with children at home. Aren't we blessed? Aren't we blessed to be in this car right now and to be able to afford the gas to get to where we need to go, which is usually taking them to different activities or going out to eat. So let's acknowledge our own blessings and then urge them, and especially now during Lent, that we're called to give, and we're called to almsgiving. And so wouldn't it be nice if we gave some? What can you give? What can you give? Can you take on your next birthday party and not receive gifts, but in turn make a donation? Or do you have a couple items around your bedroom that you don't really need anymore, that you don't play with, that you can give? Or is there a little fundraiser that you want to do with your friends? So there are different things. And actually, I'm already seeing it happen in so many schools where they work with us and they contact us. And I get the great opportunity as a former teacher to go into the classroom and try to educate the children. I ended up being more educated than they are. They ask better questions and they have better insights, and they're just so pure and so good. So I'm just really encouraged by what I see children doing and teenagers doing. We've got a local high school next weekend. They're doing a lock-in, and they're going to raise money in that lock-in for our Center for the Homeless. We have an initiative called Youth Against Poverty, and it's a spin-off of our group called Young Professionals Against Poverty. So we've quite honestly tapped into every demographic in our community to help us, because we need everyone. As Molly said earlier, it takes everyone, and if everybody does a little, we're going to get a lot done.
What do you suggest to do to help a homeless person if the Center for the Homeless or the local shelter is full? Do you go to a local church? I mean, do you ever?
Yeah, I'm kind of hanging my head on that one, because remember earlier I said the gentleman I met who said he's out here on the street corner because he gets enough money to be in a hotel. It was a tough conversation for me, because when I asked him, and I always ask, hey, have you tried to stay at the Center for the Homeless? I work down there. He said, yeah, it's full. And then I call up the Center for the Homeless, and I usually have to identify myself. Like, hey, this is Steve. I work there. And then I say, hey, do we have any beds available tonight? And yeah, sadly, more often than not, they say, oh, Steve, we're full right now. So I just try to verify that they know our system and they're being honest. And this gentleman was. And then I tell them to keep trying. This time of year is interesting for us because the weather finally, after 6 months, is getting a little bit warmer. But you have to remember, too, this is interesting. People are starting to receive tax refunds. And so right at this time of year, you'll see folks who have a tax refund, they've had a little bit of cabin fever, and they leave. And they're gone, and we don't see them. And we wonder, where did they go? Well, they got a refund, and they just had to get out. I don't imagine it's easy living with 200 people on any given night, and then additional 30 people who come in just for weather amnesty. So I guess I can appreciate that, but sometimes I worry that you just lost a great opportunity. You had a bed. And so some of our beds will turn over right about this time of year. But the question is, if you're not in that situation where you work at a facility like I do, it's very difficult. If they're extremely cold or warm days, usually your city would open up cooling shelters or warming shelters, and you could contact your county or city and ask them. That's something that they ought to be doing. And if they're not doing, that's another thing to advocate for. And then see if you know the rest of the facilities, and if you could find out if they have beds available. And that's the stuff that I think we lose sleep over at the Center for Homeless, is knowing that we uncovered every stone. We tried everything to get them into every facility, and that on that particular night, they might not be able to stay at one of these facilities. And that's just the worst. That's the worst situation to be in, and that's tough.
Robin has asked, is there a nationwide app or any kind of website that details support available in each city? Who is that, Robin? Yeah. Robin, we should create that app. If there is that app, I'm not aware of it, and I'm going to research it. I love that idea.
That's really excellent. So we should work on that. Yeah, there are certainly, I was thinking about that. Like, are there a couple of resources? First, I would say Notre Dame has a wonderful, wonderful layout as they approach this topic of homelessness. And they give a report from the National Council on Homelessness. It's a very robust report of the state of homelessness in America. So if you go to nd.edu, and I think you go to this Hesburgh series, they have information on homelessness. Of course, then the next series is on, I think, immigration and then mental illness. So these are great. But so read that. There's some great stuff in there. There's some great videos, and there's some great text. So you can honestly Google homelessness and services for homeless, and you'll get a whole bunch. But the National Council on Homelessness would be a great place. I was thinking of some movies or books that were compelling. Same kind of different as me is a story about a gentleman in Denver who's an artist who became great friends with a gentleman named Denver. It's a great book. Many know Pursuit of Happiness because it turned into a major motion picture. Some people know the story From Homelessness to Harvard, and that's Liz Murray's story out of Bronx, New York. So there are just some great stories about great experiences. Dailygood.com is just a website I sign up for. KarmaTube. They're not specific to homelessness. They're other stories, but oftentimes that's where I met Willie Baronet through Daily Good and his video and his TEDx talk. Oh, TED has some great talks from people who experience homelessness. So, but I love the app idea, and I think we ought to look into that one.
Absolutely. We're almost out of time, but I think we have time for a few more questions. And Robin also has this excellent question about safety. She said that recently in Arizona, she encountered a homeless man and a dog and wanted to transport them to the shelter in the car. But how do you navigate the safety issue?
Well, so I think there's another part of that question as well. I thought she was going to ask more about the dog. Because, a lot of folks who experience homelessness have a companion. And at our facility, I just got asked this question yesterday. The particular dog who lived with us was a service dog. And so more often than not, when we're accepting animals, it's service animals. So it's tricky to find facilities that also will house their pets. We've had cats with us before. And the reason that's a little tricky, too, you have to remember, maybe it's hard for me to believe because I love dogs, but not everybody's a dog lover, and they might not be comfortable with that. But so I thought that was a question, but the question was about safety. It's a concern I have. I think it's a real concern. And maybe the better response there, and I don't know if in this city, I think she's in Arizona, Robin is, I don't know if the buses would allow animals on that. So you have to be really careful. Again, there's no one answer to solve this. I think we have to trust our own instincts, and even then you still have to be cautious. But did you feel safe? Did you feel comfortable? Were you concerned? Can you go and get another friend with you, so you feel that much more safe? Molly, I don't know if you have an answer to that too, not to finish up, but Robin's female, you're a female. Would you feel less safe in that experience? I don't do things like that when my children are in the car. I don't want to put them in harm's way. I guess I probably shouldn't put myself in harm's way, but I've done that for myself, or I've walked through some rough neighborhoods and met folks there, but I wouldn't bring my kids into that particular experience.
I don't think I would do it alone. Yeah. I would probably look for a friend. What role do local police departments play in terms? I know that there's different relationships in different cities and towns in terms of their support.
Yeah, by and large, we have great support here locally through our first responders, firefighters, and police officers. We have 3 police officers who work on our staff, so I'm sure that helps us to have an even better relationship. And so we work really closely with them. And yeah, there's oftentimes folks who experience homelessness might be referred to the police station, and they know us, and they might work with us. So I think I want to be careful because we might have some police officers out here say, "What did you just say?" I can't speak for every city, I know I've had experiences in South Bend where police officers have transported homeless persons to different facilities. They may have transported them from a mental health facility into our facility. So, and that might be a great response. And of course, Robin in Arizona, I don't know if you're in Phoenix, but if you are, visit our friends at Andre House, where Father Tom Doyle, CSC, is doing a great job leading the community there at the Andre House. So some great folks out there.
This was just a great suggestion that came in. Someone said maybe you call a taxi or Uber and you pay for their fare.
Yeah.
The one driving.
Yeah, that was the other thing. I mean, I guess I mentioned the bus, and I should have said Uber or taxi cab. Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you, whoever made that suggestion. That yeah, pay for them to get in a cab or Uber. Someone else wrote in too about elderly, and are we seeing elderly? I met a woman the other day who shocked me when I thought she was about 60 years old, and she told me that she was 85 years old. So she's now the eldest person that we have had at the Center for the Homeless. And I thought it was a gentleman who was a veteran who was 81 years old and just left our facility for good reason. But so 85 years old is the oldest homeless person I've met through our facility.
Wow. Well, okay, I think we're going to finish with this last question. What do you think is the most important thing to think about when it comes to homelessness? What do you hope that people listening to this will take away, and whether it's a misconception or something that you can do to help?
Well, yeah, you just gave the answer I was thinking. Is a misconception. You know, I've been really fortunate for the last 11 years to work with the homeless in our community and to meet some great homeless folks around the country. And I think there are misconceptions. Look, there are truths too. Just like, you know, we meet folks in all walks of life who are maybe more lazy than others or not want to work as hard as others. That's just a part of life. It's human condition. But I've met some incredible folks. I've met some well-educated folks. I've met priests who've experienced homelessness, star athletes, folks with undergraduate degrees, master's degrees, PhD, law, the whole spectrum. And more often than not, a couple things didn't go well, or maybe a bad choice just spiraled out, and they really had their back up against the wall. I thought of a children's book, The Three Questions, and it's, you know, who is the most important one? What's the most important time? And what's the right thing to do? And the most important time we know is right now. And the most important thing to do is to be with the person you're with, and the person you're with at that time is the most important one. So when you find yourself on the street corners, when you find yourself walking through cities, to continue to think of those people, to pray for those people. If you could reach out to those people and build a relationship with them, I think that's more often than not the right thing to do, and it's what I'd encourage all of us to do. And by the way, for me, this time together is really a reflection right back on me that I don't have all the answers. I'm not an expert. The challenges that I present to you are the challenges I present to myself that I have to live out on a daily basis. Today's gospel, love thy neighbor. It's not always easy. It's not always easy to live out that golden rule, but it's something we're all called to do.
So much.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for being a part of this webinar, for submitting your questions, for listening. If you would like more information on the homelessness initiative that we're doing right now as a part of the Hesburgh Service Initiative, please visit my.nd.edu. On the Serve tab, and you'll see the Hesburgh Service Initiative. Thank you again. Have a wonderful